Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Water Forum 101 session. We are going to be here with you until 7 o'clock, and we're going to take some time to get to know each other, and we're going to have an exercise where we do introductions. So we will get to that in a moment, but we'd like to first have some initial opening remarks. So I'll just pass it off to Jessica Law, the Executive Director of the Water Forum, to get us started tonight.
Thanks, Tanya. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for attending. It's good to see your faces, even if they're in small little squares on the side of my screen. Sorry that we can't all be in person, but it's good to have you all here and to see some familiar faces and certainly some new faces as well. So welcome. We have a pretty good discussion planned out for this evening, and we are going to try and make it as interactive as possible, considering the format that we have, but we're really looking forward to hearing from all of you, and not just sharing some stories about the Water Forum and what we do and why the Water Forum is important to the region, but also hearing about you and your organizations. So we have a guest speaker tonight, Ann Sanger from City of Sacramento. And Ann has offered to talk a little bit about the Water Forum and her experience in the Water Forum as a Water Caucus member. And Ann, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, Jessica. I appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So welcome, everyone. It's great to really see so many people here. My name is Ann Sanger. I work for the City of Sacramento. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for the Water Department, the Department of Utilities. And the city has been a member of the Water Forum since the beginning, and we are very invested in its success. And at the beginning, we were members, or we have been members of what is called the Public Caucus, which is what we are all inviting you to consider becoming members of tonight. And the important thing about the Public Caucus was that it was to be a reflection of the public. And I'd say over 20 years ago, when the Water Forum negotiations first started, and I think there's some of you on here that may have been around then, the world looked very different. And so when the Water Forum was put together and the Public Caucus members were selected, it was a fairly small group, but it was what we thought reflected the public at the time. Fast forward 20, 25 years later, there's a lot of diversity and a lot of issues that intersect the environment and equity that we felt were not being well reflected. There are 4 caucuses, which you'll hear about. And the Water Caucus generally does look like the water agencies that they represent. The Business Caucus looks like the businesses that they represent. And the Environmental Caucus looks like the environmental community that they represent. But the Public Caucus really didn't have the diversity that we felt like it should have. And I think we can all appreciate that when we have different people in the room, different decisions get made. And I will say this from a woman's perspective. I think, we always appreciate there being some diversity when it comes to gender, when decisions are made, and that the outcome can be different. And I think that's true for all sorts of diversity. We don't want to leave anyone behind. It's not, water is so important in all of our lives, but it's not maybe the first thing that people think of when they think of participating in a community organization. But it's something that is, I think, integral to being in Sacramento. The American River, as it's our water supply and as a recreation and environmental asset, is, I don't know, I think it's just a primary reason for living in Sacramento. So we'd like to have everyone partake in the Water Forum and make it an open process for those that want to partake. I would just want to mention one last thing, which is, in the long run, sometimes people will ask me, well, why should we make the public caucus more diverse? And I think in the long run, it really prevents us from having blind spots where you're going down a road, you're putting together an agreement, and maybe there's a point of view or something that you haven't taken into consideration. And when you have a more diverse group of people around you, it helps come up with a decision that's going to be more durable in the long run. And I think something that we can all be proud of. So with that, I will hand it back to Jessica or to.
And thank you everyone so much for taking the time to be here tonight. I do have a presentation. I'm going to try and tell the story of the Water Forum. One thing you should all know is that I am very new to the Water Forum myself. So there are some friends here that, and some members of the Water Forum that have been around for a lot longer, folks who have been engaged for 20 years, and then others who have been here for the past few years. So I will definitely be leaning on them to fill in the gaps and to help sort of fill out the story. But the Water Forum story is itself a really exciting story, and one that's been really, it's a story of success for the region. So let me walk through, hang on, I'm just gonna switch screens a little bit here. And let's see. Okay, so the Water Forum story and how we came to exist. So I'll run through it, and I'm gonna walk you through sort of a little bit of the background of the Water Forum, and then talk about each of the elements of the Water Forum agreement itself. There is actually a physical document called the Water Forum Agreement. This is what it looks like. I keep it next to my desk, or on my desk, for reference sake. So I'm going to walk you through that, and then we're going to talk a bit more about the Public Caucus and goals, and then kind of take a little break and kick into breakout sessions. So the Water Forum story itself. California is very much known for its water wars. I spent about 10 years working on Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, so I'm very familiar with those conflicts. And they tend to be perpetual, whether the main conflict is really over water for people or water for fish and wildlife. That's sort of the long-standing conflict. And it really wasn't that long ago that the Sacramento region itself was engaged in this conflict locally. So the Water Forum itself has held together over the last 20 years and has really done a lot to reduce the level of conflict and to really bring the region together and the different, the different caucuses and the different interests in the region and bring it together. So the Water Forum itself as an organization and as an agreement is a living and really dynamic agreement between the plenary members. It's held together with accountability, trust, clear communication, really a commitment to a common objective, and not much duct tape. I haven't seen much duct tape so far. Okay, let's see, next slide. Critical challenges. So going back to the 1990s in Sacramento, there were some critical challenges for water resources in this area. There was really a need for water to keep the economy growing, as well as the water needed for a healthy environment. At the time, the Sacramento region was experiencing some of the highest population increases in the state. Maybe some of you were around in Sacramento at that time. The region was already heavily dependent on water supplies from the lower American River and projecting the need for even more in the coming years. And when we talk about the lower American River, we're really talking about the point from Folsom Dam down to the confluence with the Sacramento River. At that time, there was strong evidence that our fisheries were in danger, both steelhead and fall run Chinook salmon. And at the same time, groundwater tables underlying much of Sacramento County were falling, which is a trend that started about 40 years earlier. So if you're thinking that it caused some conflict in the region, you're totally right. By the 1990s, the region had already a very long history of legal challenges between these groups over water supply and health of the lower American River. Okay, next slide. The Water Forum Agreement itself. So in the 1990s, the city and county of Sacramento launched the Water Forum negotiations. They were the two original members. And the participants included business interests, environmental NGOs, public agencies, and water providers. At the time, these were groups that viewed water resource management in very different ways and from different disciplines and perspectives, but also from different needs and requirements. So water providers just generally and some of the other public agencies viewed water as a resource that was important for the population and for economic growth. And they viewed their mission as extracting that resource, whether from surface water, groundwater system, or making it available to their customers in a way that provided healthy supply at the lowest possible cost. So reliability was a main objective. The other folks that came to the table were the environmental advocates who viewed water as a natural resource and something that had inherent value in remaining in the river to support fish and wildlife populations. So slowly over the next 7 years, from 1993 to 2000, stakeholders looked for a way to meet their common objectives rather than fighting over those two missions. And you'll hear us talk about an interest-based negotiation process. That was the facilitation and negotiation technique that was used. And at the time, the Water Caucus and the Environmental Caucus were then joined by a Business Caucus and a Public Caucus. Those 4 caucuses developed an agreement that to help balance the 2 equal goals. So providing a reliable, safe water supply for Sacramento and the region's long-term growth and economic health, and then also preserving the fishery, the wildlife, recreational, and aesthetic values of the Lower American River. So those are our beginnings. Okay, next slide. So the process wasn't easy, but the work was definitely worth it. In the year 2000, more than 40 diverse groups signed the Water Forum Agreement. And yes, that is Arnold Schwarzenegger in the photo, if you're looking carefully. Since that time, the Water Forum has been honored as a model for collaboration. There's been books and papers written about it, and we have received the state's highest environmental honor twice. And we're also recognized at the national level. And so where other areas of the state are still locked in conflict, the Sacramento region holds together with the Water Forum Agreement, and we call that our North Star. So let me tell you a little bit more and sort of tell a story about Water Forum in action, especially during a critical year like 2014. Okay, next slide. So you may recall in December of 2013, California was starting to slide into what became a historic drought. What you may not know is that the Sacramento region was particularly troubled. Locally, we were enduring the driest weather conditions in our history. Folsom Reservoir was projected to drop below 200,000 acre feet, which for the rest of us means it's a really, really low level, a level that had never been seen before. This has serious implications both to the 500,000 people who directly rely on Folsom for their drinking water and the environment of the Lower American River, just as salmon were finishing spawning and steelhead were beginning to arrive in our area. These conditions triggered something called the Water Forum Dry Year Conference, which is a part of the agreement. So the agreement anticipated that there would be years where you weren't going to be able to eat water supply. And so the Dry Year Conference brought together the environmental, water, and other stakeholders in December in downtown Sacramento in 2013 to consider the worst case scenarios for continued dry weather. Their goal was really to come to a consensus on recommendations they would need to make to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation for the amount of water that should be stored in Folsom for people and the amount that should be released into the Lower American River to preserve salmon and steelhead. They worked together through the Water Forum to balance the water needs of people and fish during a very high stakes moment in the community's history. And I can only imagine what it would have been like had there not been this framework provided by the Water Forum Agreement. And also I'd say the level of trust that the Water Forum has cultivated over the past, at this point, 13, at that point it was 13 years. And really just the level of communication and the ability to get through conflict together. So ultimately the rains did arrive after a few years, but this story really shows that the Water Forum and its legacy, there's continued work to be done, especially in the light of climate change. But Water Forum members are committed to continuing this collaboration now and through the Water Forum 2.0 process. A little bit more on that in a minute. Okay. Let's jump into what's in the actual Water Forum Agreement. Doing all right? So the Water Forum Agreement itself has 7 elements. These elements are key to implementing the co-equal objectives, which we talked about. And you can see them all here in this sort of circle diagram. So there's the 7 elements are the flow standard, which controls river conditions, habitat management, surface water diversions, water conservation, dry year actions, groundwater management, and then the water forum successor effort, or basically our current governance structure. So I'm going to run through these 7 elements quickly, just so that you can get a flavor of the expanse of the work that we do. So the flow standard, for the past 2 decades, the Water Forum has been studying and refining guidelines for the amount of water that needs to flow down the Lower American River to both protect and restore fish while improving the reliability of water supplies for people. So this guidance, or these guidelines, are called the Modified Flow Management Standard. And I think one thing that's important to understand about this is that the majority of the water that is released from Folsom Dam is under the direction and control of the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, or Reclamation. And so while there are a lot of users on the river and a lot of users of Folsom Lake and some local districts that rely on water for Folsom to provide it to their citizens, the major controls on the river those decisions are being made at the federal level by the Bureau of Reclamation. And that's why communication and coordination with them is really critical. Habitat management. So the Water Forum has a really strong legacy of habitat management work on the Lower American River. We have been restoring crucial habitat almost since the beginning. We've completed 11 projects total, investing more than $7 million to create over 30 acres of spawning bed and 1.2 miles of side channels, which are prime habitat for salmonids. About half of this money is from local agency contributions, and the other is from grants from the state and federal government, including the Bureau of Reclamation. And if you haven't checked out our website, there's some super cool videos on there that show the habitat restoration work and fish coming in pretty much almost immediately to use the projects once they're completed, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, groundwater management is the 3rd aspect of the agreement. Groundwater provides over half the water used in the Sacramento region. The Water Forum Agreement itself provides guidance for protecting our groundwater resources. Under this agreement, we've seen turnaround in groundwater conditions, as you can see shown on that graph. It shows that prior to the Water Forum Agreement, groundwater levels in some part of the region were dropping as much as a foot a year. But because of actions of Water Forum stakeholders, the groundwater basin is in much better shape and is headed towards sustainability. So the Water Forum is actively supporting some ongoing efforts to develop and implement groundwater sustainability plans that are consistent with recent legislation. Some of you may have heard about SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which came out a few years ago and has really changed the regulatory framework for groundwater throughout the state. Okay, next slide. Water conservation. This is an important topic that touches a lot of aspects of the work that our caucus members do and is important to the Water Forum. The agreement outlines how water conservation and efficiency are an important part of managing the water resources. Each water provider in the region has committed to implementing water conservation plans. And in the 1990s, the Water Forum was projecting that the demand for drinking water supplies would double between the year 2000 and 2020. So in reality, water demand did rise for a while, but now it's actually reduced, which is a good part of the story. This is due to drought and the economy, but it's also largely due to some aggressive water conservation on the part of this region. So this is a trend that we want to see continue. And really, the important part of this graph that you're seeing here is that over the past decade, water use in the Sacramento region has remained steady, even as the area's population has increased. So that's a trend that we want to see continue. Okay, next slide. Increased surface water diversion. So another aspect of the Water Forum Agreement. Even with water conservation and groundwater, water providers in the region still need to draw additional water from our rivers. And the agreement outlines guidelines for each water purveyor that's a party to the agreement to look at surface water diversions over time. An important part of this is what happens when you end up in a really dry year. So I had already mentioned the dry year conference, but the agreement also includes water purveyors switching their supplies according to availability. So for example, during wet years, they draw more river water, which is more plentiful, so that we can recharge groundwater and reduce the impact there. And then during dry years, they switch to groundwater so that there's more surface water for fish. And then sort of the final aspect of the Water Forum Agreement is the Water Forum successor effort. So you'll see this is a picture of a lot of the Water Forum plenary members. I believe it's the last 2 years, probably 2019, on the site of a restoration project. And everyone is involved here because they really enjoy the work of the Water Forum. I'd been asking recently, just as a part of getting up to speed, what people enjoy about the Water Forum and their participation. And some common responses were that they are learning all the time. They're always learning new information from the Water Forum caucus members. The camaraderie is really great. They enjoy working with the colleagues, and that the Water Forum is getting work done, and that is really valuable to be engaged in and involved in. Okay. Next slide. So we really have a huge opportunity ahead of us with Water Forum 2.0. So we just celebrated 20 years and all the work that's been done over the past 2 decades. If you haven't looked on our website, there's, if you look under the 20th anniversary, there's some really great information, videos from that event, which was held online last fall. And I encourage you to look at those. But the celebration included a climate symposium where we also explored how climate change is expected to impact our water resources and the environment. But then also how, as a community, we must consider environmental justice and equity in our plans for adapting to climate change in the future work of the Water Forum. So the executive director of the Water Forum at the time, Tom Goring, made a commitment during that symposium to engage with the environmental justice community and to look at equity aspects as a part of the Water Forum 2.0 process. And I'm here to let you know that I want to continue that commitment, and it's a really important part of our work, and hopefully an important part of the Public Caucus work as well. So for the past 9 months, we've been re-engaging stakeholders on the Water Forum 2.0 process to really explore how the agreement should evolve, and what considerations of challenges ahead we need to pick up and look at. The Water Forum 2.0 process, we will end up negotiating a new agreement to guide our actions over the next 30 or so years. And really, we need your help. So we're looking for Public Caucus members to engage with us in that and to help identify and incorporate the vision for equity and land use and really the legacy of the Water Forum and what we want to create. Okay, next slide. So Public Caucus goal, we're going to talk, excuse me, just 1 second, I've been talking a lot. So I want to talk a little bit about the goals for the Public Caucus. And we're going to spend more time talking about this today, but they really fall into about 3 categories for me: social equity and diversity, land use and user experience, and I'll explain that, and then legacy of stewardship. So for the Public Caucus, we really are trying to broaden participation in the Water Forum negotiations to reflect the need for social equity and diverse representation of interests, public interests, as they relate to the co-equal objectives of the Water Forum. We really need to understand the interconnectedness of the actions that we're taking, whether it's from the perspective of long-range land use planning, which does take a comprehensive view of and approach, but also from the perspective of the user, whether you're living, playing, or working on the Lower American River and really throughout the region. We need to listen directly to the communities that are in this region to gain a better understanding of a range of perspectives on all of the aspects of the Water Forum Agreement, and really build on the Water Forum's collaborative legacy to ensure its long-term success. And that legacy includes obviously the collaboration work, but also education, outreach, habitat restoration, all of the activities that we've engaged in, and advocacy for the region, not just within this region and the state, but beyond California as well. So we really view the Public Caucus as key to the water forum's future. We are hoping to serve as a role model in California for ensuring that equity and inclusiveness are in our deliberations and decisions, and we need help making sure that we can accomplish that. Ultimately, we really want to be an entity that is dedicated to inclusion and equality, and really planning for a community where we all have access to safe, reliable water and the beautiful natural resources of this region. Next slide. Okay, so a little bit more just about timeline and process, and hang in there because I'm almost at the end. But just a little bit on the Water Forum 2.0 process. So where we are in the time frame, we're expecting it to end, to really go through sort of the end of 2022. That includes getting through the majority of the work in the next year and a half, and then spending a few months on approvals. We are engaged in ongoing discussions that are really looking at the basis and the foundations for the Water Forum, and we're starting to review elements of the Water Forum bit by bit, sort of working group by working group, and make progress on those. So right now we're working on reviewing the habitat management element, and then we're also looking at water conservation and water use efficiency. So as a member of the Public Caucus, you'll be invited to engage fully in these deliberations and decision-making. And in the end, all new participants and existing Water Forum members would take the new agreement to their boards and to city councils to decide if they will become a signatory to the new agreement. So there is an approval process at the end. And if approved, the groups would then become Water Forum members for the full term of the agreement if they choose. So that's timeline and process. We're going to talk more about this, but just sort of brief overview. There are lots of ways to participate in the Water Forum. We have Public Caucus meetings. So right now, the Environmental Caucus, which is one of our longer standing caucuses, they meet on a monthly basis. The other caucuses meet on a semi-regular, semi-monthly basis as well. We have quarterly plenary meetings, which is when the entire group comes together, all the caucuses, stakeholders, groups that we're working with, and we have presentations. We just did a plenary meeting about a week or two ago. We have topical working groups and committees, like I had mentioned. And then we also have these foundational briefings where occasionally we'll get together and say, hey, we really want to talk about this big issue that's coming up, and we're able to bring folks together. We'll talk a bit more about time commitment and sort of what that looks like. I've heard that the typical time commitment is anywhere between 2 to 6 hours per month. For me, it's definitely a 40 hours plus commitment per week. So, but that's me. And then next slide, steps to participation. Again, we'll walk through this a bit more, but really showing up as a representative of an organization. I think we've talked about that a little bit, who everyone is coming to represent. We ask that you have a connection to the dual objectives of the Water Forum. So the co-equal goals of water supply reliability and health for the ecosystem. The next step in the process is really starting to get to know the Water Forum. So initially we would ask that you attend 1 to 2 Water Forum sessions to kind of listen and learn more. And then, really with that, starting to understand the commitments as a plenary member. So, affirming your desire to continue in the process. The participants usually attend 2-hour caucus meetings on the monthly basis, the plenary meetings that happen on a quarterly basis, and then based on your interest and availability, attending other meetings, whether it's a working group or a committee or some of the other foundational briefings. And just to know, there's usually sort of 1 hour of prep and follow-up work after each of those meetings. So we do ask that you show up having done your homework. For some of you, confirming your participation, whether that's asking, your board for approval, that is an important step. and, you know, providing, yes, an affirmative, yes, we can participate, or I will be your representative, is an important step as well. So, you know, we just ask for genuine interest in joining the Water Forum, and really a commitment to participating in all the Water Forum, you know, in the Water Forum activities, especially the Water Forum 2.0 process. And then the last thing, sort of in steps to participation, is we ask that you stay informed, watch your calendar and invites that you see coming from us. You know, we're obviously under COVID, we are doing Zoom meetings. We would pre-COVID, we did a lot of meetings in person. I'm sure we will be going back to in-person meetings at some point. We do like to feed people, so we generally have some pretty awesome food at our meetings, and I'm looking forward to feeding everyone again. And then we ask that you participate, abide by the ground rules, and really pitch in and join the conversation. So those are steps. Next slide, and this is a video that we wanted to show you. Mariana, are you good on the video?
It's Tanya. I think we're good.
All right, so I'll let that start. So this final slide shows a video of our new mural and of the Lower American River. It's at Sac County Administration Building. It was installed for the Water Forum's 20th anniversary. If you haven't seen it, it's absolutely gorgeous. It takes the perspective of an otter looking down from the bottom of the river up to the top, where she sees a river teeming with fish and a shore full of wildlife and people of all backgrounds and abilities enjoying it. And this mural really represents so much about the Water Forum, just the opportunity to embrace a new perspective, a vision for what we want our community to be like, especially for our children, and the commitment to the Water Forum's co-equal objectives of water supply reliability and environmental stewardship. So let's see, is the video? Yep, we're all done. Okay. Well, I just wanted to say thank you again for taking the time to be here. We're really thrilled to have you, and we'd love to share a bit more, and I'm here to answer questions. And I know there are lots of other Water Forum members that are here today as well that would be happy to answer questions. All right, that's the end of the presentation.
I'm stopping the screen share. Thank you so much, Jessica, just so we can see each other a little bit better. And before we get into breakout groups, we'd like to just keep everybody together in plenary first to see if you have any questions of Jessica about the presentation, or of existing Water Forum members, particularly Public Caucus members who are here. And then thank you to those of you who are putting some of your ideas in the chat. We'd really like to begin the conversation in plenary, and then in maybe 10 minutes, we'll put you in some breakout groups to continue the conversation. Since in this format, which is so flat, it's really hard to feel engaged in a conversation with 30 people. So we find that when we get you into smaller groups, you can actually interact. And so that's the reason for that. And so there are three things in particular. First, if you have any questions for Jessica, like I said, we'd also like to have some of you share what water-related issues are most important to you in your organization that you're bringing to this conversation today, and where you see an alignment or opportunity between your organization and the work of the Water Forum. And then if there's anything that's coming up for you, if you're thinking there's quite a nexus, we're really interested in being involved, but we have some concerns, or we feel like there may be some barriers to our participation, it's important for us to know that as well. So I'd like to just open it up for some minutes for us to have this conversation together around any of those topics that you're interested in bringing up. And if you could raise your hand, it's just easier and more orderly using your reactions tab in the main toolbar. And you can also put your questions and comments in the chat. Go ahead.
I see a question in the chat, and it's Nora, and it says, could you share with us how environmental justice for underserved neighborhoods relate to your goals? I'm new to this and would love to hear your thoughts.
Nora, thank you for that question. That's a really relevant thing to be thinking about. And my understanding is that the Water Forum Agreement, and I'd love to hear from other Water Forum members on this, but the Water Forum Agreement has mainly focused on flows in the river and regulation of flows in the river and habitat restoration or habitat management in the river. And while we have explored and have gotten involved in some projects on sort of groundwater management in the region, mostly our engagement with the community and sort of at the neighborhood level is more through the water purveyors and work that they are doing on water conservation, water use efficiency. And so I don't know the detail to which Water Forum has participated at the neighborhood level, but that is water use and water affordability are important aspects of the current conversation that we're having right now in Water Forum 2.0. And Ryan, maybe you can add a little bit on that from the RWA perspective.
Sure. So really quick, just who is RWA? RWA is 20 water suppliers in the greater Sacramento area, the vast majority of which, not all of those 20, but the vast majority of which are signatories to the Water Forum. RWA itself is a signatory to the Water Forum. I think what I would add to what Jessica said is the part of the reason why we came together on the Water Forum to begin with was there is conflict, as Jessica laid out very eloquently, between human use and environmental use. But sort of the next place, or one of the next places, that conflict remains, but I think as Jessica laid out, the Water Forum is an excellent foundation for resolving those conflicts. But the next place where water and the water community needs more engagement is on this issue of equality, is how I would describe it, and environmental justice, and making sure that access exists for all people, not just sort of on the average there's access, but there's access for the full spectrum. And so I'm really curious, you know what I said in my workout group, why am I here? I'm really interested in who's here tonight, because as water suppliers, we do a really good job of thinking about meeting our challenges today and tomorrow from a supply standpoint, but we're not public relations, right? And we need to be more engaged in hearing from the community. And so, I mean, I think to answer Nora's questions, it's challenging because I think that we need to do more work, but that's where the Water Forum, I think, is one of the best places, if not the best place, to engage in those conversations. So to build that communication between communities and water suppliers. So I hope that answers the question, but obviously happy to answer any follow-up questions.
Thank you, Ryan. And building on your response there, Betsy Reif-Snyder has a question in the chat regarding affordability. Does Water Forum look at equity aspects of water rates and how it might be a part of the water conservation discussion?
That's a great question. And that is a topic that's come up in the water conservation, water use efficiency work group, which is sort of a subset of Water Forum members that are coming together to work through the existing element and to talk about how it needs to reflect current conditions, right? Sort of 20 years in the future. Is there anyone here that's in that work group right now that can speak about or has been participating?
Yeah, this is
Inga, go ahead.
We have talked about addressing water rates and not only the possibility of targeting rates on efficiency, but also having them deal with affordability and equity. And so that once you get into the building blocks of a rate, that, you know, the cost of affordability, your demand projections and actual use, that rolls into what the rate is. And if those components are all looked at and equity is part of that, then, you know, there's possibilities that it could be done differently than it is now, as well as water conservation.
Thank you, Inga. And this does continue to come up in these discussions, and I think we will be exploring this really important question you just raised in more depth as we continue the Water Forum 2 conversations. Any other questions? You please feel free to also either raise your hand or unmute yourself if you can't find the right button, and ask your question or make a comment. Ansel.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. I just want to name, I think those last two questions are kind of questions that have been raised by members as we've sort of begun this process of renegotiating the agreement, and things that have been brought up as examples of issues that weren't covered or, you know, explicitly discussed in the 2001 agreement. And I think that's part of the effort to expand the public caucus, is again to kind of deal with those questions. And maybe they're not in the first agreement, but that's why we're going back to the table and taking a look. And so I think those are great questions and great part of what the public caucus, I think, wants to kind of bring to the negotiating table. So
Thank you, Ansel. Barbara, Evoy?
I just want to say I'm just really pleased so many of you are here. And some of us have been in water for decades. And I'm on the Environmental Caucus, and it's an extension of what I did for work. But we don't have the diversity of opinions, diversity of ideas, diversity of experiences that many of you bring. And I really want to encourage you to give the Water Forum a look, because these are important decisions that are going to affect your life, your children, your families for a long time. And it's important that people weigh in, other than those of us who have been bureaucrats for 40 years. So, you know, we have our own little internal dialogues, but we really need to hear from you about what's important: affordability, access, environmental justice. So that's a very important role that has come late to the table, far too late, but we really would appreciate your time and effort. So I just hope that some of you will give this forum a chance in your life. I know it's an additional commitment, I know it's additional time, but I would really hope that you would consider it. So thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I think it'd be great for us to get into small group discussions. I just
Very much looking for the framing and the scope and the issues that are really critical to be addressing in the Water Forum 2.0 agreement. And Barbara listed some of them that we've been hearing sort of repeatedly, which is affordability, equitable access, and education. And I know this group has a tremendous amount of expertise in these areas and in others. And so I think we are really looking for ideas and points of leverage, you know, important things for the region to be considering and to be pursuing. So